thanks very much, and thanks to all of you for giving up your time this morning. As you've heard from Christian, former Labour Working Pensions Minister, worked fairly recently for the Financial Services Authority, doing some work now with the Manchester Revenue and Customs. As you can see, I choose my occupation solely to court popularity. And I do have to say, Christian, that, well, thank you for those kind words about credit action, but since the Chief Executive is sitting in the middle of the audience, she would give me hell if I didn't point out that it's a financial education charity and not a debt charity, though it is actually a sister charity. We've set up a sister charity to Step Change, which is, of course, one of the nation's most important debt charities, and I'm very proud to have been asked to chair the working group on personal debt. And that is because it is one of the major challenges which we now face as an economy and as a society. For so long, the economy has been apparently partying on credit, and we heard Christian point out at the beginning that 63 quarters of growth that we had, and we're now suffering the hangover of debt resulting from those parties. $1.25 trillion of mortgage debt and another 158 billion of unsecured consumer credit on the latest figures available. And that is not going to go away. According to the Office of Budget Responsibility, estimates are that on current trends, total household debt will exceed $2 trillion within the next 5 years. Now, if you can add up those noughts, you're doing better than I am. It's a lot of debt hanging over people's lives. Now, much of that, of course, we described as debt, but it does represent the responsible credit that any modern economy needs to function. But increasingly, much of it is out of control and is damaging to personal and family well-being. And Credit Action, who publishes on a monthly basis statistics on debt, tells us that somebody is declared insolvent or bankrupt every 5 minutes, and that a home is repossessed every 50 minutes. Simmons Advice Bureau are dealing with more than 8,000 new debt problems every working day, and the Money Advice Service estimates that there are 6.6 million over-indebted households in the UK that perceive debt as a heavy burden or have had arrears of 3 months or more. Now, personal debt is obviously always with us, but as well as increasing generally, debt nowadays is starting to wear a new face. Step Change, which was until recently CCCS, tells us that they are dealing with a lot more older people who are in debt, many of them carrying interest-only mortgages, which they have no means of paying off, or find themselves in debt in other ways. And many who would have been considered as being part of comfortable Britain in the past, who have been very much on the edge and vulnerable to falling into debt, are now finding that as a result of changes in their circumstances, redundancy, ill health, relationship breakdown, tip them over into serious indebtedness. But, to adapt a phrase that my former colleague Frank Field much loved, debt, like unemployment, doesn't fall like God's gentle rain on the population evenly. It strikes from below, and it has its most devastating effects on those with whom Breakthrough Britain 2 is most concerned, the poorest and the most disadvantaged. Now, the working group that I'm chairing on serious personal debt will bring together a thorough analysis of the scale and nature of Britain's personal debt problem, especially as it affects that most disadvantaged group. And we'll harvest the latest evidence and statistics, listening both to the experts and to those who are directly affected. We'll look at the financial products which might be available either now or potentially in the future to those most financially excluded, to see whether they actually make matters worse or whether they can have the potential to provide an alternative of sustainable credit. We'll be examining the role of mainstream and high-cost lenders and of alternatives such as credit unions and social enterprise lending. And we will turn the spotlight on the illegal lenders and loan sharks. One low-income household in 20 who have been refused credit have turned to the illegal loan sharks. And illegal money lenders supply as many as 6% of households in our most deprived communities. So we'll be considering how we can improve people's resilience resilience against debt by increasing their financial capability. Now, in this endeavour, I'm joined by a distinguished group of experts. We've got Martin Kopak from FSA, Sharon Collard from Bristol University, Joanne Elson, who runs the Money Advice Trust and National Deadline, Phil Holdsworth from Christians Against Poverty, Nicola Hughes from Shelter, Damon Gibbons from the Centre for Responsible Credit, and Claire Wiley from the Financial Services Consumer Panel. And all of us are being kept in order by Mark Duncan from the Centre for Social Justice to make sure, I must feel like herding cats, Mark, that keep us on the straight and narrow. Now, what's been described as the worst downturn since before the 1930s, even worse than the 1930s, with 1,400 people being made redundant every day, it's not surprising that we should face a tsunami of serious personal debt. But we also need to ensure that public policy, those measures intended to address poverty and worklessness, don't inadvertently push some of those it seeks to help further into debt. Universal credit, which I absolutely support as a principle, has the potential to help hundreds of thousands of people into employment and out of poverty. But unless people are equipped to cope with that shift in budgeting from weekly or fortnightly payments to monthly payments, many could slip into debt. Housing benefit reform, which I had a hand in the beginning when I was at DWP and which is now moving into the next stage in the social sector, could also mean that people who, instead of having their rent paid direct to landlords, receive it as cash themselves, unless they have the budgeting skills, could find themselves in difficulty. And so we as a group will be looking at ways in which we can make sure that those reform measures in welfare really do achieve their objectives, and that we find ways of ensuring that they don't push people further into debt. So you'll have seen, Christian, there's a lot of synergy between the different working groups already. Debt damages family relationships, it undermines educational potential, it reduces psychological and emotional well-being, and it prevents people participating as active citizens, as Debbie and her team would like to help them to do. So I want to thank CSGA for going through the process, going through Britain too. Thank them for involving us in this, and I'm looking forward to working with the other working groups and especially hearing from all of you the ideas you have got for making sure that still further people's lives are not destroyed by unsustainable debt. Thanks very much.